Hello everyone and welcome back to the Fantasy Network. I am, of course, Jimmy Nuts. And if I sound a little weird, it's because my allergies are beating me down like Robin Hobb does her protagonist in her stories. It's been a rough week, so I might sound a little nasally, but I'll try not to sniff and cough while I do this review. I had to get it done. I had to film today because it's time to review the Tawny Man Trilogy, the third installment for The Realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb, and it's in contention for probably one of the best, if not the best trilogy I've ever read. I'm going to cover all three books here, and it's going to be spoiler-free. I will be mentioning character names, so if you don't want to know who dies in the previous Fitz trilogy, you might want to tune out of this. If it doesn't bother you, feel free to carry on. I'm not going to give away any spoilers in this review. The Tawny Man Trilogy starts out with book one, called A Fool's Errand. Actually, probably the best name that a Robin Hobb book so far has been given in Realm of the Elderlings. I think it's a fantastic title, much better than Ship of Magic. And it is probably not a controversial statement to say that Fools Errand could possibly be one of Robin Hobb's best books. I think on a scale of all readers, this is the most tightly knit novel that she's written in this series so far, and it has a lot more action than I was expecting. As soon as I started Tawny Man, something dawned on me, and it was a question that I had, and I want to hear your answer down below in the comments. I'll probably just sticky this question down at the top of the comments so you can reply to it, but I want you to take a second, breathe, and think, why aren't the witted vegan? These are the truly important questions that I have about Realm of the Elderlings, of course. I love the beginning of Fool's Errand. It is really just us taking our time, as Robin Hobb always does, to kind of set the scene and get into our character's head. In this case, obviously it's Fitz, and to figure out what he's been doing all this time, because there's a huge jump in years between Assassin's Apprentice, or Farseer, and Tawny Man. It felt like coming home, getting back into Fitz's head and seeing where he's at and what he's learned and you know, how life's unfolding for him as a recluse out in the woods, it seems. And also a good reminding that I don't like Starling at all. I think the intro to the book is very well done, and it is a setup, obviously, because it's the beginning, but it also feels like you get a really good grip on Fitz's mental state and like the impending doom as these people come to visit him and he's slowly being pulled out of his recluse mindset. It kind of reminds me of like the pandemic. You know, a lot of us have been locked down and things are getting, I don't want to say back to normal, but like things are starting to come back that we weren't able to do for like the last year and a half. And I think a lot of people kind of feel that impending doom of like, oh, I've just been in this whole different type of reality for a year and now I'm being pulled back into the fray, expected to be just as normal as I was before I was a recluse. So I kind of identify with Fitz in that regard as things, you know, kind of open up and get back to normal in our lives. So that was just a piece, like, because I've read this right now, I was able to identify with that a lot more. And there was just a sense of impending doom of Fitz having to get back involved in society, because when that happens, generally Fitz maybe makes some bad decisions or just terrible things happen to him because he's the catalyst. And it would be criminal for me not to kind of comment on Hap. I think Hap is an amazing addition to the cast of characters, and I really like getting more of his, you know, details and all of his descriptions here in the beginning of Fool's Errand, because it's strange. He's basically Fitz's son now, right? But Fitz has biological children, in theory. But Hap seems to be the one that he treats truly like a child. And Hobb just has like a thing against like biological fathers, and I haven't figured out why yet. And I think it would also be pretty obvious to point out the fact that I see Fitz as like the Birch in this situation, right? Or Burek, however you want to say it. But I feel like that is his relationship to Hap and stepping up and stepping in for somebody who's basically been cast aside. I like Hap. I like Hap a lot as a character, even though he can be quite a numbskull. In Fool's Errand, you begin to see that Hobb's word choices that she made in Live Ships and Farseer end up paying off thousands of pages later. It's one of my favorite things about Hobb as a writer. I've said this in a lot of my like non-reviews. I've said it on live streams and stuff before, but I really want to drive it home here. It's just the fact that when a word choice pays off that many pages later and that many words later, you could tell that it was just such an exquisite amount of care, like so thoughtful in the way that she writes. It reminds me a lot of George R.R. Martin, who's like my other favorite. Robin Hobb and Gurm are like neck and neck. And one of the main reasons is because both of them write in that style where word choice matters. And a lot of that word choice ends up impacting our relationships and decisions that were made, you know, many pages ago in other books. And relationships are evolving here in Fool's Errand. It's not staying stagnant. It's not just a, hey, it's the group's back together kind of thing. No, things have changed. People have gotten older. People have had time to mull on how they were treated in the past. And one of the relationship dynamics that I really enjoyed was the evolution of Night Eyes, the Fool, and Fitz, and how that grew. I thought it was probably one of the more interesting parts of the book, and it was nice to see. It was nice to see it not to stay stagnant. Of Robin Hobb, you know, she cashed in on what she built in the prior books, but she didn't just live on what it was. She begins to build upon it even more here and give it a lot more nuance. Speaking of the Fool, one of the things that I'm kind of curious about, and if anyone knows the answer, please get down in the comments and let me know. But is there really an explanation for why the Fool loves carving so much? I feel like there was, and I may have forgotten or missed it. But it seems like, I mean, the Fool's in Fitz's cabin just carving stuff up, and I want to know why the Fool tends to lean into always carving wherever the Fool may be. As far as the plot goes, I really enjoyed the fact that the Witted Ones being persecuted is becoming kind of a focal point of the story here. It's a big pivot from like the Red Raiders and Farseer. In an interesting one, to say the least. There's a lot of politics involved and a lot of intrigue and who's lying and backstabbing and propaganda. It just seemed like such a vast change from the Red Raiders. I was wondering how it would be pulled off. Turns out it's pretty good. The fact that the magic seems to be one of the more important points here. I mean, obviously it was really important in Farseer as well, but it feels a little more fleshed out without it getting like really long descriptions and into the dirty details. I still like a level of mystery to the magic. I think being, you know, the wit and the skill all makes sense in the context of this book and the story that she's telling. I like the fact that we're getting more and more of it. It has really enhanced the first-person perspective so much that sometimes I forget this is a first-person, you know, book or trilogy in this instance, and that's on purpose. Robin Hobb picked this perspective in this magic system for a reason. And I do have somewhat of a prediction, and since I've read the whole trilogy, I know that it isn't exactly answered yet. But, you know, the Fool continues to ask Fitz if he's had dreams about dragons or riding dragons. And then I also think back to Royal Assassin when Fitz, you know, is told by the Fool that he will one day have a name and the Fool intends to make sure that he deserves it. I feel like those things are all kind of foreshadowing that maybe possibly at the end of the series that maybe Fitz becomes a dragon, or maybe he like bonds a dragon through the wit. That's kind of my prediction. If you know, please don't tell me. Please do not spoil that in the comments. That would be soul crushing. Please do not. But that's my prediction on the record going forward. Yeah, so Fools Errand, an amazing book one, an amazing ending as well. And there's just a lot more going on than I expected. Like I said, Hobb, I like Hobb's pace. It's very methodical. It's very well thought out. But Fools Errand, I felt like Hobb took off the gloves a little bit, especially in the second half of the book. And there was a lot of action, there was a lot of twist, and a lot of stuff going down that's going to impact book 2 and 3 and all of Realm of the Elderlings. As far as pace, character development, everything, if someone told me Fool's Errand was their favorite Robin Hobb book, I wouldn't bat an eye. I happen to think book 3 is the best, just because of all the heartstrings that it tugged on for me. And don't worry, Fool's Errand will destroy you. It destroyed me. But I just felt like it was such a different look from Hobb and her flexing different literary muscles and getting the attention of the reader in a way that she had not done before. So Fool's Errand to me was easily a 5-star book. Like, so much happened in Fool's Errand that I kind of felt like it was a trilogy in itself of like 3 acts almost, which I guess most stories end up being. If there was any kind of negative I could give the Fool's Errand, is the fact that I didn't feel super inclined to immediately jump into book 2. Like, if I had read this when it was published, I would have been okay waiting for book 2 because it had such a solid ending. There's still mysteries, all that good stuff, but like the ending felt solid. And that seems to be like a reoccurring theme with Robin Hobb's book 1s to me. Maybe except for Ship of Magic, because that kind of leaves you in a spot where you want to know exactly what's going on. But I kind of felt like that at the end of Assassin's Apprentice as well. So now book 2 is Golden Fool in the Tawny Man Trilogy, which is another pretty good name. I would say that ranks up there in the top half of Robin Hobb's book titles so far in Realm of the Elderlings. But the damage that was done in book 1 to characters is lasting into this book, and we're seeing the repercussions of it, which is a continued theme of consequences for heroes' actions. And I really enjoyed the opening of Golden Fool because, like, I think it was in the first 2 chapters, you just get a ton of info dumped on you, and not in an exposition-y way, but like plot lines just like kind of thrown at you into the sea of readers. It's like, hey, stuff's about to get really interesting, and you better start paying attention. Much like the book 2 in Farseer, I feel like this is going to be the political book, and I ended up being correct in that, I think. And I just love, Hobb will just like casually drop, like, oh, hey, this is going to be a book about political intrigue, and here's about 1,000,000 things to think about, and if you stop thinking about them, you're going to be very shocked and hurt in about 300 to 400 pages. You know, we're getting to see Buck and Buckkeep and Kettricken again. Those are some of the most heartwarming moments to me, with Fitz coming back to his old stomping grounds. And the fact, it's a little bittersweet, but Buckkeep and Kettrick, all these people have evolved. They've moved on a bit and grown or regressed. In some ways they're the same, but Buckkeep in its environment feels like kind of a different place. And then, of course, with him coming back to Buckkeep, Fitz kind of levels the place that he spent most of book 1 and that he spent all these years in between Farseer and Tawny Man. And I thought it was just so symbolic. Again, Fitz removing all proof of existence of himself from the world. But it's like beautifully bitter because Fitz does so much and is so talented in a lot of ways, but can never get the credit that he's due. So it's just very symbolic of him kind of raising where him and Hap had stayed at for so long. And it was one of my favorite scenes in the book. I specifically wrote down in my notes that chapter 15 was one of my favorite chapters in the entire book because you got to see the evolution of relationships of Fitz coming back, but also the deterioration of a lot of other friendships and relationships. And it's just really beautiful. And I think Fitz in the full... which, is obviously the name of the third trilogy, but their relationship is one of, if not the best of all time in fantasy. And part of the reason why their relationship is so good because it feels like Fitz loves making bad decisions. I saw a talk with Robin Hobb and George R. R. Martin, and she was kind of talking about how she was asked a question about why she treats her characters so terribly. And she's like, I don't. They just make really bad decisions. She's like, sometimes Fitz makes a decision. I'm like, oh, you idiot. This is going to add 2 to 3 chapters to this book. And I loved hearing Hobb talk about her writing style like that and talk about Fitz because it makes him feel real. And I think that's why a lot of people, go to Fitz and the Fool as their favorite characters because Hobb is doing something a lot more deep than just writing somebody with, a couple different traits. I mean, these are real people in her head. And I love the way it comes across on page when Fitz screws up. And you have to give Fitz this. He is frustrating, but he's consistent. Like, a lot of people will change and grow over time, but they will continue to make the same mistakes throughout their entire lives, whether it be in a different frame or not. And I think Fitz kind of embodies that on page here. And when it came to the end of the book and everything, all this is a lot of political intrigue. And without giving away spoilers, I can't talk about it too much. But I thought it was very, it kind of mirrored Royal Assassin in the fact that it was Fitz, again, finding his foot in Buckkeep politics and the big decisions for the kingdom. And I like that a lot. I felt like the ending, again, was a bit finite. Again, not feeling like, oh, I got to jump into book 3. I mean, I did because I love it. But, there are still questions remaining, but a lot of stuff gets tied up as far as like the tight plot that was planned for this book specifically, even though there's overarching themes that are still continuing. I think this ending compared to Fools Errand ending lacked a little bit of the tension and drama. But, though, what are you going to do? Like, you can't knock it out of the park every single time. So it was a great book, great ending. I just thought Fools Errand was a little bit better. And then we move on to the soul-crushing finale of this trilogy, Book 3, which is appropriately titled Fool's Fate. One thing that I think gets capitalized on really well in Fool's Fate is the relationship that happens between Swift and Fitz. I won't say too much about why that happens or who they are or whatever. And also Thick. Like, Thick's relationship with everybody is just super complex. And I think Thick is, like, the best. I really, really enjoyed it. I know some people think that he gets a little too much spotlight here in book 3. I've even, I think Jake Bishop called it Thick's Fate. I laughed. I thought it was pretty funny. But Thick to me is like Robin Hobb at her best characterization. And Swift is also a welcomed addition to the cast. But it's like Fitz's relationships with these younger boys that really fleshes out the impact that Burek had on Fitz as kind of a father figure. And you see a lot of those shortcomings in what he taught Fitz coming out in Fitz when he, relates to these boys. And Webb is almost like a wise uncle, right? And Webb is trying to poke holes in the way that Fitz sees the world and how he instructs these kids. It's really fascinating to watch. And I have to be honest, when Webb was introduced at the end of book 2, I was not super sold. I thought it was kind of random, maybe like, kind of fitting a piece in there for it all to work. But book 3 sold me on Webb. Obviously, it's Robin Hobb, right? So the characters are always going to be great. But Webb ended up being a little bit more than just a piece of the puzzle to me, and ended up being somebody that had a pretty profound impact on multiple characters in the story. And there's like a bunch of social tension in this book, with Fitz and the Fool having like an issue, right? There's something between them and they're not communicating properly. It's so weird because I want to see the Fool back on page, but I actually feel the anxiety that Fitz has whenever the Fool pops up in a scene. It's like, oh, is he going to talk to me? Like, I could feel that anxiety upon me as the reader, which is just another example why Robin Hobb is one of the very best to do it. And Hobb is just stringing us along. Some of the reunions that we want to see this whole time. She's just stringing us along. And even when Fitz is communicating pretty much telepathically with another character that I won't mention for spoiler purposes, it's like nobody could make a relationship build telepathically in a dream where one of them doesn't even look like themselves. They look like a wolf. That is masterful. And it's something that's totally different. And like, you're giving us what we want, but not the way we want it. And it keeps stringing me along to want more and more and more. And that's the kind of meticulous work that Robin Hobb puts into her characters and her plot. It's unseen. I mean, there's no one else doing it like this. Truthfully, there's not. And there is a sword exchange scene, to keep it general, that I teared up at, that I thought was so emotionally impactful and landed in every single facet. It's because of that meticulous planning and care that she put in thousands of pages ago. If I had to like pick one word to describe Realm of the Elderlings, before when I was reading Farseer, I said subtle. I think I kind of agreed with that in Live Ships, but I've changed my mind. The one word I would describe Realm of the Elderlings with is alive. And it's because of the way Rob has like this mortal type of momentum in the way that she writes. And what I mean by that is like we can feel like the aches and pains of our characters growing older. And it's not just like that, right? It's like a very subtle, it's like a subtle evolution, and you saw it definitely in Golden Fool and in Fools Errand, and the impact that it has on the characters around that person. You just grow, and it feels just so mortal to read Robin Hobb, and it makes you feel so vulnerable. And it's like real growth, you know what I mean? And it's not always for better. Sometimes it's for the worse. And Robin Hobb goes there. She explores it, and she puts us through it as the reader. And it can be tough. And we get an extra layer of that dimension, I think, through the magic system. And I've talked about it already in this review, and I've talked about it before. I just think the magic system complements the story so well. I think at this point, like reading into book 3 and then what we got as a conclusion, I think I can say today that this is my favorite magic system in any fantasy series ever. I don't care if it's considered a soft magic system or a hard magic. I don't care what system you put it against. This is my favorite because it just feels like it fits. Oh no, that's awful. God. And speaking of like magic and all this stuff, we should talk about the prophecy, because I feel like it gets unraveled a little bit more, like the White Prophet prophecy. And Fitz is exploring that role a little bit more. He's starting to uncover it a bit and kind of embrace being the catalyst. And it's funny because in Farseer, the Fool would finish Fitz' sentences or thoughts, and it would really creep Fitz out like, whoa. In this trilogy, we see Fitz start to do that to the Fool, and now the Fool seems to be a bit uncomfortable with that. And there's a massive reunion in this book that you want the whole time. And it felt so realistic and so emotional. And I wish Fitz had said more, but you know what? I don't. Because he'd probably mess it up, because that's who Fitz is. So maybe leaving it to as little words as possible is the best way to go. And the end of this book has so many things that happen. Like the last 200 pages of this book are blazing. I mean, with just, you know, she takes time when she needs to, but like a lot of stuff goes down that's going to matter, and it's going to hurt, and some of it feels good. It hits every range of emotion I can imagine. I can't even begin to allude to the stuff that happens because I'm trying to keep this spoiler free, but I have all of my spoiler thoughts written down. I'm going to do another spoiler discussion, of course, for Tawny Man very soon, probably the next week or two. I'm excited to do that. I mean, I have so many spoiler notes written down on my phone, it's kind of ridiculous. But the one thing I wanted to say is, a lot of people say, oh gosh, prepare yourself, you're going to cry, all this stuff. That's fine, but I think we have to also sell the fact that Robin Hobb is not just someone that's constantly, you know, kicking you while you're down as a reader. She also provides like quite a bit of feel-good moments and a lot of hope. Like it came out of this like, you know, pretty melancholy and, you know, I'm not going to use the word like depressed, but I came out very sad. I mean, there's some really heart-wrenching moments that lasted with me for days after I closed the book, and I'll think about for the rest of my life, I'm sure. But with that, there's a lot of hope. And there are things that happen that I would be considered uplifting. So I wish that we talked more about the range of emotions that Robin Hobb hits, rather than just the fact that she can make you cry like nobody else. And yeah, that's how I feel. I think Fool's Fate's the best book of the trilogy, and now I think it has overtaken Royal Assassin as my favorite book so far in Realm of the Elderlings, which is not something I say lightly, because Royal Assassin was, in my opinion, flawless. I do absolutely think this is the best entry so far. The pain and the suffering is sometimes almost overwhelming, but the payoffs to the scenes and the relationships built are unmatched by anyone else that I've ever read in my life. I mean, there were times where I literally had tears running down my face. I had to take a break from the book. Like, I was like, until I have a whole day to be just emotionally wrecked, I can't go on. but I also found hope in a lot of those moments. In this journey through Realm of the Elderlings, and specifically in Tawny Man, the journey just feels so worth it. And even all the prices that we pay as the reader to read it, and the characters and the imprints of the trauma it has on these characters that, these people that we love in the story, it just feels worth it. And that's why Tawny Man is probably the best trilogy I've ever read. And Realm of the Elderlings is quickly becoming maybe the best series I've ever read. We'll have to see how I feel all the way at the end. But it's just the fact that every decision has an impact, and it like ripples throughout the narrative. And you wonder just by yourself, like, how will this impact all these characters that I love? People who don't even get mentioned a lot, like Patience. Patience is excellent. I always wonder how maybe Fitz's decisions will impact her or any of the other characters. And that ripple effect is really powerful. And nothing is free and nothing is forgotten in Realm of the Elderlings. And it is so satisfactory, this ending of Tawny Man, that I could not read anything else and be good. I'm shocked that Hobb actually even continued it. There's still a lot of unanswered stuff, but it ended so perfectly. It's ridiculous. And if there's one way to wrap it up, this review, is to say that I am content. It feels so real. But that's it. That's the Tawny Man review. I absolutely loved it. 6 million stars out of 5, whatever people do with their rating scales nowadays. I loved it. You should read it. If you have, let's talk about it down in the comments. Do not give anything away for Rainwalk Chronicles or Fits in the Full trilogy that ends the Realm of the Elderlings. Please don't. I'm so close to the end and I haven't had any spoilers, which has been excellent. But I want to hear your thoughts. Are you going to read Tawny Man? And you all should show up if you have to the spoiler discussion I'll be having here on the channel within the next week or two. Make sure to keep an eye out on the community tab for when that's going to happen. And I want to thank you so much for listening to me talk about this. This was an important review because when a series hits so hard with me, specifically this trilogy out of this whole series, I want to do it justice and I want to make sure that my ideas are concise. I feel a little bit under the weather, but I hope I did a good job of kind of encapsulating the impact that it had on me as a reader and a huge fan of Robin Hobb. If you like this video, make sure to hit like and subscribe. It helps me out tremendously. You can turn on the bell for notifications to know when I upload things. You also get notifications telling you that I'm going live. So if you miss the announcement for a live discussion or a Chatting with Nuts podcast episode on a Friday, it's a nice way to get a reminder pushed to your phone. So if you feel so inclined, you can turn on the bell. Until I see you next time, I hope you're good. I hope you're safe. And remember to always keep turning the page.